Hello, Mr. President.
How are you, Dennis?
Very well.
Good to see you.
Terrific to have you on my show.
Thank you so much. I think they're going to make sure that everybody's got all their business in order before we start. You guys ready?
Sound speed, camera speed, quiet on down there.
How are you, by the way?
Very, very well. We are all set, on fire, one might say.
Yeah, we're rolling whenever you're ready.
Okay, that's whenever you want to start.
Terrific. The two of us really share something, namely the taste of real power, the power to influence what people read. How do you cope with that gruesome responsibility?
Well, you know, I started doing book recommendations while I was president, mostly as a fun thing to do, particularly during the summer when people in the States would go on vacation and they were looking for recommendations. And over time, because still have a following, I think I've been very interested in being able to help young authors, authors who haven't been discovered yet. At the end of the day, Dennis, I'm a big believer that in the power of literature to create connections between people, to deepen our own understanding of ourselves and our lives. And literature has been a great gift to me. And so whenever I can promote and proselytize on behalf of literature, I'm interested in doing so.
I just started the show with recommending Bernardine Evaristo's Girl, Woman, Other, the German translation of it, which you recommended as well. What did you like about the book?
Well, it's a timely book because it talks about women and women of color and them trying to deal with what I think we all deal with in the modern world, and that is how do we root ourselves in our identity and a sense of who we are, while also recognize the humanity and reality of other people, and seeing how our identities intersect, and recognizing that I think one of the challenges of the 21st century, even more than before, is learning how we live together and recognize each other and see each other, despite those surface differences. And I think the stories that the women tell in that book give some powerful lessons about how that can be achieved.
At one point in her novel, Bernardine Evaristo writes about the Obama syndrome, which is, in her words, waiting for Prince Charming, for Mr. Right. And I remember when you came to Germany during your campaign in 2008 to speak at the Siegessäule in Berlin, there gathered over 200,000 people. What was it like to be received like a messiah? What was it like to feel those, to be the focus of all those attention, these hopes, these visions? How does one cope with that?
Well, as I write about in A Promised Land, it was a gradual process of getting accustomed to being in the national spotlight and then the international spotlight. When I started my political career, it was in relative obscurity. It wasn't until I ran for the United States Senate in 2004, I was at that time 43 years old, where I became nationally prominent here in the United States. And that was the first time where I spoke to a large crowd. And then next thing I knew, once, because of the power of television, you've spoken in front of a TV audience, suddenly you started getting bigger crowds. And then as my presidential campaign grew, what you realize is that people will project dreams and hopes and possibilities onto you. You become a character in as much as you are a person, a symbol as much as you are an ordinary human being. And fortunately for me, I think I was old enough, maybe knew myself well enough that I understood it for what it was, that I was flattered, I was hopeful that people were responding to my message, but I never started believing in my own hype, as they say here in the United States. I didn't believe that somehow the audiences were an indicator of just how great or special I was. What I think I tried to remind myself was that really I was more of a reflection of what they were hoping to see in government.
I'm interested, what was the writing process of A Promised Land like? What have you found out about yourself by writing this book?
It's interesting. One thing it reminded me of is how hard writing is. So it's the first book that I had written in over a decade. So, and I'm a very methodical writer.
You write in longhand, is that right? On legal
I write
text?
in longhand first, and then I type it into a computer after that. What I think I learned more than anything else was just how many things happened during the course of my presidency, particularly the early stages that I write about in this book. And in some ways, I did not have time while I was making all these decisions to appreciate the consequences of these decisions. I mean, you understood it, but you couldn't be so weighed down that you were paralyzed. And writing the book gave me a chance to step back and in some ways reflect on how many things could have gone wrong that didn't, but also to reflect on mistakes I'd made, to understand, I think, more the perspective of how some of the divisions we saw early in my presidency that I was surprised by were long-term trends that we continue to see to this day, not just here in the United States, but also in your country and across Europe and across the world. I was struck by, even in 2007, 2008, you already began to see the contest of ideas between the liberal, market-based democratic order that had come to dominate after World War II in the advanced world, and that was, we were always trying to export to other parts of the world. And, a more traditional, authoritarian, strongman, illiberal, in some cases populist, set of alternatives.
And the resurgence of the
you see in
new
far-right
right.
parties in Europe, and that you see first in the Tea Party here and then in Donald Trump, and that is mirrored by the politics of a Putin or an Erdogan or a Duterte in the Philippines. And so in that sense, writing the book, I think, crystallized or clarified for me these two competing ideas about where humanity is going to be going, and how we are going to be meeting the challenges of the future, and how, as I write in the book, how that plays out, who wins that contest of ideas, is not yet certain.
No, and it's reading the book gives you really a first-hand experience of these inclusive and exclusive ideas of policies. Now, I wonder, when being confronted by an economic crisis like you were in 2008, by terrorists like Osama bin Laden, by wars in Iraq and in Afghanistan, how does poetry, how does literature help you in order to find your way through these situations? Is there a place for art in the White House during that time?
Well, there was a lot of art in the White House. You know, we had this wonderful music series. We would bring in great artists to perform. I think the best way to describe it is this. Every day I had a series of very difficult decisions. And I would, as I write about in the book, have to make decisions based on probabilities and analysis, because at the end of the day, nothing was perfectly certain. You know, I could say, I think that, or the analyst would tell me, we think that's bin Laden, but we can't be 100% certain. My economic team would say, we think this is the best way to save the financial system, but it could all go wrong. Analysis and computation and facts and figures could take you so far, and then at the end of the day, you had to exercise judgment.
Did you sometimes
because,
feel like...
Because it's not a mathematical formula. And it is in that space where you're exercising judgment, where the values, the morality, the empathy that you gain from art has an impact, because it influences how do you think about what's important. What are you willing to risk? What principles do you stand by? Those are not cold calculations. Those have to do with what's in your heart, and also how well you've been able to connect and appreciate the experiences of other people outside of your own small world. And I think that I was a better decision maker and exercised better judgment because of the influence of the literature and poetry and art that I'd absorbed.
Did you sometimes feel like being transported into the world of Alice behind the looking glass, where you have to run as fast as you can just in order to stay at the same place?
Well, that is true. The relentless pressure and pace of the job is probably without equal. And you know, one of the things that's changed in the U.S. presidency, but my good friend Chancellor Merkel, I'm sure, feels the same way. You know, a generation ago, because the news cycle was not so fast, because you didn't have international 24-hour cable news, or a lot of things happened where nobody expected the president or a chancellor or a leader to solve that problem. It just didn't surface in the consciousness of people. If a tragedy happened on the other side of the world, nobody knew about it. You know, if something went wrong in an obscure agency, it might take 6 months for it to be reported. Now everything's instantaneous. And so I think one of the challenges that modern leaders have is that the expectations are higher. The speed at which people get dissatisfied is much more acute. The amount of noise and competing media is much greater, and so you have to be able to navigate, I think, an information landscape that makes leadership and politics more challenging today than probably it's been in a very long time.
I was surprised to find out that you started out as a young man writing stories. In what ways is the President of the United States a storyteller as well? In other words, what does narrative mean to you?
Well, I think every leader is a storyteller. Humans are a storytelling animal. The great religious leaders are storytellers, right? Jesus tells his parables. Moses had a story to tell to lead his people out of bondage. And politicians and political leaders are storytellers, for good and for bad. I had a story to tell about what I believed was the best of America, our journey to deal with the legacies of past injustice and move towards a more perfect union and to become more inclusive and more just and more fair and more equal. Donald Trump had a story to tell. He was telling a story about looking backwards, going back to a time when certain people were on top and other people were viewed as outsiders or subordinate. Vladimir Putin has a story to tell about a return to Russian glory. All the nationalists that you see that, for example, led to Brexit. That's a story. So these are all narratives that bring people together or push people apart. People fight war over stories. People do incredible acts of compassion and generosity because of the stories they've heard and that they believe in. So, I think, in fact, one of the reasons for writing this book is because I want citizens to understand how their own stories, their own voices connect with what often seem like these distant decisions that are being made by government leaders. No, government leaders are just people, and they're part of a community, and they're drawing on the same experiences and ideas and narratives that we all are. And so, because one of the stories I believe in is a democratic story, a story of equality and participation. My hope is that by reading this book, people begin to feel that their own stories matter as well, their voices matter as well, and that they should participate in the political process in order to make a difference.
Let's talk about some of the writers you invited to the White House. There was the Nobel Prize winner Bob Dylan performing as a musician for you. How did that go?
I love Bob Dylan. I love his music. And Bob Dylan, I think, has been famously obscure and eccentric and doesn't follow by the rules, and he was no different at the White House. Didn't say much, performed, was masterful, but wasn't making a lot of small talk. And that's how you want Bob Dylan to be.
There was Philip Roth. You gave him the Medal of the Humanities,
Yes.
I understand. And he has written famously The Human Stain, where he dreams, the narrator dreams of wrapping the White House with a banner with the inscription, "A human being lives here." Have you ever thought about this while you were in the White House?
You know, it's actually not a bad idea. Well, that was one of the great treats of being president is you know, you could have Philip Roth and give him recognition that was long deserved. Yeah, I could invite Toni Morrison to dinner and listen to her stories and you know, her descriptions of James Baldwin and other writers that had influenced me so much that she knew. You know, if you ask what was one of the greatest benefits, just personally, what was some of the most fun that I had by virtue of the job of the presidency, then it's the fact that, you know, when you call people up and invite them to the White House, they usually come. So you could meet all the people that you loved all these years.
You went with the American writer and witness Elie Wiesel and Angela Merkel to the concentration camp of Buchenwald, and
Right.
you described this in your book, and you were struck that Elie Wiesel told you that he left when he was rescued, when he was freed in 1945, the concentration camp with a sense of optimism. Where did that come from?
Yeah, this is one of the most powerful experiences I had that I describe in the book. For so many reasons. One, Elie and I had become friends by that point, and you know, he was such a powerful witness and a recorder of humanity, even in the midst of the deepest darkness. And to take that tour with him, to hear him describe the strategies that people took to maintain their humanity in the face of horror, was life-affirming. To be there with Angela Merkel, who represented, I think, the willingness for the German people to do a reckoning of what had happened in a way that is rare in human history. You know, I mean, in some ways, the United States still hasn't done a full reckoning of our history with slavery and you know, conquest of Native Americans and so on. So, and to hear her speak reflected a wisdom and a hopefulness. And for me personally, you know, my grandfather's brother, as I describe in the book, Charles Payne, was a young 20 or 21-year-old soldier who was part of liberating one of the subcamps of Buchenwald. And so there was my own personal connection to it. But I think what that story told me, and the reason Elie in his remarks said he had left more optimistic, was because his assumption was that this is so bad, this is so dark. We have dehumanized the other so much that surely humanity will have learned, and this will not happen again. And now his caveat to me was, of course, since that time he had seen the killing fields in Cambodia and Rwanda and Darfur. And, his caution to me was that, humanity forgets. We think that we remember these lessons, but as we now see with the rise of far-right parties and nationalism in parts of the world, including my own, as you now see the internet providing a forum in which racist or misogynist or radical fundamentalist ideas can flourish. It's a reminder that we can't take all these lessons for granted, and we have to continue to tell these stories. That each generation has to understand both what can be heroic in humanity, but also what can be terrible about humanity.
You
and
let your book end with the appearance of Donald Trump and with the killing of Osama bin Laden in the Geronimo mission. Why do you call this a kind of a catharsis for the American people, the death of bin Laden?
Well, the irony is that I came into office in part because of the chain of events from 9/11, which led the Bush administration to initiate not just the invasion of Afghanistan, but also then the invasion of Iraq, a war that I opposed, which in turn, I think, gave me some of the support of progressives inside the United States who also opposed the war, and that's part of what allowed me to defeat Hillary Clinton in the primary to become the Democratic nominee and ultimately president. So, in some ways, I was coming full circle, and 9/11 had a profound impact emotionally on the United States. It created a sense of vulnerability that the United States has rarely felt, even during World War II, other than Pearl Harbor. The United States, because of the good fortune of geography, has rarely been struck on its own soil. And it changed American life in ways that were profound. It changed U.S. government, and in some ways strengthened a military intelligence infrastructure in which trillions of dollars and countless resources were poured into to keep people safe. Some of that was necessary, but in some cases, what we saw was it also led to excesses. It led to a violation of some of our values, as we saw with some of the renditions and so forth. And so I think bin Laden stood for so much that America feared or had been led to continue to fear. And by taking him off the field, it allowed us, or at least it allowed me, then to start engaging the American people more seriously in not having a perpetual war mentality.
Now,
And to start thinking about, are there ways in which we can redirect our resources towards schools, towards healthcare, towards climate change, other big battles that need to be fought.
Now, it was a privilege to talk with you, Mr. President, but I have two final questions, please. One last service for mankind I have to demand from you, that is sharing a secret with us, a mystery. How did you manage, together with your wife, Michelle, to turn your daughters into readers?
Well, the place to start is I used to read to them very early in life. I read to them while they were babies sitting on my lap, even though I don't know how much they understood, but they heard the human voice, and I think there's power in that. And they became readers on their own. And look, the truth is that it becomes harder when you're raising kids now with screen time and cell phones, and but I still think there's a magic in reading that is different than the visual arts, but you have to start them young, because if they don't get in the habit early, then I think there are too many distractions these days to get them to focus, to apply the patience and the imaginative work involved in being an active reader.
Now, leaving the White House and saying goodbye to all this power and these privileges must be very hard. So please tell us, how did Bo and Sonny react to this?
You know, Bo and Sonny are doing fine. And they were two of our best ambassadors. And they put in a lot of work while they were in the White House. They are enjoying retirement quite nicely, thank you, and are getting an ample share of treats. They're still as spoiled as they ever were.
Mr. President, thank you for your time. Thank you for writing the book, and I'm looking forward to the second part of your memoirs.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Really enjoyed it, Dennis. Bye-bye.
Bye. Barack Obamas Ein verheißenes Land ist im Penguin Verlag erschienen. Die deutsche Übersetzung stammt von Silvia Bicker, Harriet Fricke, Stefan Gebauer, Stefan Kleiner, Elke Link, Thorsten Schmidt und Henriette Zeltner-Schein.